All right. Well, good morning, everyone. How are you two doing today?
We're doing, I mean,
Good.
Yeah.
global pandemic. We are doing what we
It
can.
is 2020, the
Surviving.
forgotten year of what happened?
I never thought I'd miss 2019, but here we are.
Well,
I know, right?
On the upside, you can attend Gen Con right now and you can get your food right when you want it. You can get your drink right when you want it.
I beg to differ. I am a mother with 6 children, 2 dogs, and a husband in this house. I'm quite sure it would be easier to ask housekeeping for something.
Okay, well, some of us anyway.
I miss my island noodles.
Oh, yeah. I
Island
can't
noodles.
eat anything anymore, but we used to years ago before all my allergies and stuff kicked in. We would always go to P.F. Chang's and the steakhouse. We used to go all the time. What's the big steakhouse that everybody goes to? They carry meat around on a sword. I can't
Oh, it's a
remember what it's
Brazilian
called.
steakhouse. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. The name is not coming to me.
Yeah, it's eluding me.
That's all right. Island Noodles is a vendor that so at Gen Con, there is a little street right outside that's closed to cars, and they fill it up with food trucks and food vendors. And one place is called Island Noodles, and they have this like 2-walk setup where they're just cooking noodles nonstop. And it's just delicious.
Even when I could eat, I don't think I ever ate at the food trucks. So
it's a hit or miss sometimes.
A lot of people like them though.
Yeah, like you said, sometimes like one is like when you go, to like avoid the lines, because it's like 90 degrees outside and.
I never had time, even when I could go eat where I wanted to, I never really had time to eat lunch. So I know that the booth workers would go out and get food from the booth truck or from the trucks, but I usually didn't. I would just skip lunch. So that's probably why. Who did I eat? Well,
my fiance is always like, your soul is in danger.
We don't talk about that.
So exactly.
Yeah, I ate snacks. I ate snacks. I would bring my own snacks to the booth a lot of the time. But most of the time I was so busy running from meeting to meeting, I didn't have time to eat lunch.
Yeah, getting you at Gen Con has always been difficult.
Yeah.
As someone who's tried to find you for a signature. We're like, I just want to say hi. You're like, I'm across the hall and I'm coming, I think.
Maybe, and then an hour later I'm lost. No, it's terrible. I feel so bad sometimes. I had a fan that for 3 years in a row, I guess, was trying to catch me at Gen Con and never found me. And I wasn't trying to be difficult, but I've always got a ton of meetings and a ton of events. And then the year that I was a special guest, I had my booth to run, and then I had another booth to run, and then I was a special guest on top of it. So I was all over the place in panels and everything else. And I don't think I slept more than 4 hours at a whole convention on their 50th. That was, the 50th was crazy. I try really hard to be available for everybody, but that is probably the biggest difficulty for me for Gen Con, is everybody wants a bit of my time and there's just not enough to go around. And a lot of that is friends too, because since I live in Indiana and most of my industry works on the coast, I only see my friends at Gen Con or when I go fly out to other cons. It's been, I don't know about you guys, but it's been so bizarre for me not to have to fly to conventions. Like, I've had nowhere to go this year, and it's insane. I don't even.
Yeah, yesterday I had a panel with Ben Warner. It's like, hey, it's been last Gen Con since I've seen you, and it's an interesting, especially for those in the industry, like being able to look back and be like, hey, like, so this is how we maintain some of our connections from the people we see online. It's the only gathering that everyone goes to.
It's true. And like I missed PaizoCon, which is probably my favorite con every year. It's small and personal, and 80% of my industry friends are at it, so I get to go and see them, and that's nice. And so really it was Gen Con last year that was the last time I got to hang out with most of my friends. I've had a few that came and visit early in the year, but now we haven't even left home in 4 months, let alone had visitors. We're just like
visitors, huh?
Yeah, I think we're actually trapped in a video game. I'm convinced of this.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, let's start this thing off. Greetings, everyone, and everyone in chat. My name is Andreas Walters, and I am the host for this panel. We are at Gen Con Online, and this is our panel for getting into crowdfunding tips, just general things about crowdfunding in general. Yeah, 2020 Jumanji. There we go. I'm Andreas Walters. I'm Andreas Walters. I'll be your host, and I am from Metalweave Games. I am the creator-owner of Metalweave Games, known for the Baby Bestiary, Hyperlight Drifter tabletop RPG, and other creative works. And I will have my panelists introduce each other. Craig, let's start with you. Who are you? And
hi, I'm.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm glad. Embers, yes. Another one of my books.
I'm Craig Campbell. I'm the owner and designer at Nerdburger Games, and I've made a handful of RPGs like Die Laughing and Capers and the upcoming Good Strong Hands, and have run 8 successful Kickstarters. Basically, all of my design work and publishing has been built out of Kickstarters. All little niche indie games, nothing ever more than about $12,000, going all the way down to like 2.
I mean, getting something funded is all that matters, right?
Hey, successful is successful. I've worked on Kickstarters that brought in over $1 million, and I've worked on Kickstarters that brought in like $5,000, and we were all super excited because it was a very unknown thing. So sometimes those little ones, when they succeed, are actually more mentally rewarding than the big ones that you already knew were going to bring in a lot of money.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And for my background, I've kickstarted probably 14 projects. Anywhere from...
You've done a lot.
I know.
Like every time I talk to you, you're like, want to write something for a new Kickstarter? Sure.
Yeah, sign me up. So
I do it for the books.
Yeah, contributor copies, right?
That's it.
The best feature of writing on projects.
It's true.
Yeah, so I've done a bunch of Kickstarters, from the Baby Bestiary non-player cards to Hyperlight Drifter tabletop RPG, and a bunch of Baby Bestiary calendars, and soon Baby Bestiary plush. So for this panel, let's start talking about crowdfunding. So
and who is BJ?
Oh yes, who are you? I know you've kickstarted a lot of stuff. Like, you've worked on a lot of stuff. You are fairly prolific in the industry.
Yeah, I work on just about everything. So I guess my big thing is I own Playground Adventures. We're the makers of family tabletop games for Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons and Hero Kids. I also am the vice president of Lone Wolf Development, the makers of Hero Lab. I also became the proud owner just 2 days ago of Digital Dragon Studios, a new brand that I am launching, which will be doing apps. I think this is actually the first place I've spoken of it publicly, but you can look for apps from us within the coming months because we had everything done before we
What kind of
got the
apps?
business. I am not at liberty to say due to our partners right now, but
okay, no worries.
Imagine that they will be tabletop themed apps.
I'm curious.
Yes, we'll talk more on that later.
You have a Gen Con exclusive. This is
You actually do. By complete accident. I haven't even posted it on my Facebook. Nobody outside this house and like 2 other people even know it's coming. So so that's the thing I do. And then I actually work, as my degree field is marketing and business, and I work with a lot of companies to help them boost their Kickstarters, their sales, get their businesses off the ground. Sometimes they just pay me for an hour or 2 of my time for advice. I also work as an author and a cartographer and an artist in our industry. I've written for Cobalt and Paizo and Your Baby
BJ has done a lot of stuff in this industry. A lot.
Yeah, I do. I tend to bounce around. I'm ADD, so it's always have like 100 projects going on, and I'm sure that will not change anywhere in the near future. So yeah,
and this is why I'm amazed I actually got her for a panel, for 1 hour dedicated.
It's just a total accident that I happened to be free this morning. I've purposely been a little Gen Con light because that Digital Dragon Studios is what I've been focusing on. And I was like, so I just happened to get everything wrapped up in time to be here.
Cool. All right, so let's dive into it. So Kickstarters, obviously there's the big thing about scope. So if you're kickstarting your first project, what is the scope that people look at when you're starting your first project? So for me, when I started my very first Kickstarter was non-player cards. And that was after coming out from the Numenera community and wanting to, kickstart something because Kickstarter was fairly getting popularized.
It was all the rage back then.
Yeah, I know. It was all the rage. Numenera was the big Kickstarter that came. And that was actually what turned me on to Kickstarter for kind of the second, third time. like that. I wasn't really into Kickstarter much until then. Like I ordered like marshmallows off Kickstarter. That was like one of my first backed projects. Was like delicious homemade mushrooms.
I think we backed Monty Cook's first one too. Like it's been a minute, but pretty sure I've backed most of him and Shanna's stuff.
Yeah, so for me, I was a designer in the community. I was like a fan designer, and then like I built up support with that design community. And then for me, I'm like, oh, I want to do the systemless project, and so I launched non-player cards, which funded by the skin of its teeth. For I believe I was asking for $15K at the time, or was it 15 to 25K? I don't remember.
I think it's 20K when Kickstarter first started. Well, it was a hard push. It really was. I remember doing some that we just barely pushed it over the edge.
Yeah, and for me, that was a huge struggle. Like I jumped into communities I never knew existed, like Google Plus. I got into blogs I never knew existed. There was a lot of market. Yeah. Like I got to show it off everywhere, every day, and I felt
till people hate you.
Yeah, I was always worried that people would hate me.
There's the balance. I think that's probably a key component of most Kickstarters is finding that balance. And some people have an just almost internal intuitive sense of what that balance is, and other people are like spam.
I think that intuitive sense is guilt.
It's true. I think a lot of it too is just after, like, I know for me, after so many years, I'm just like, yep, this is the hard line. Don't do it more than that. That's like, it's cringeworthy to me. But in the beginning, I think everybody, no matter what your skills were, really struggled to find, what's too much, what makes people angry, what is enough to get the impressions. Seriously, there is, the human brain is actually incredibly fascinating. You'd be surprised how much you study it when you're doing marketing in college, or when you're going back and redoing your certs and stuff. Well, you have to, you don't have to, but I try to keep up. But it's fascinating because there are rules to sales and marketing with the human brain. And part of that is, you've got the 7 impressions rule, which is if somebody sees something 7 times, they're likely to get it stuck in their head and want it. And eventually they're like, oh, I got to come back and buy this. But there's also the rule of if you overdo that, it's like a switch flips in the human brain.
See it
and
8
says,
times?
It's not 8. It's not 8. I'm done. It's not 8, but it is a number that you have to find for your audience, because it's different for every demographic. And because there's a point when you're scrolling through your feed where you're like, oh, that looks cool. Oh, that looks cool. Man, I'm actually going to check that out. And then eventually lead to purchasing it. But then there's a point after that where you're like, I have seen this 15 times. You know what? I've seen it so much. They're just over advertising. They're incredibly aggressive. It feels like they're pushing it in my face. I don't even want it anymore. It's sort of like when you tell your kid to go play with their new toy. The new toy is no longer fun because you have told them and forced them to go play with it. And so you have to be very careful to market properly, yes, and to make sure it gets out there and people do see it, but make sure they're not seeing it every 5 minutes to the point they're like, whatever, I don't want your thing. It's really fascinating actually when you dive into it. But
cool. Craig, how was your first Kickstarter project?
I had done a bunch of freelancing for Wizards and for a few other companies, and decided I'll make my own game. I can do that. And design, play tested, all that, kind of got it squared away. And then I went in with Kickstarter, like, okay, I have no idea how this is going to go. The game has like the core information, the core rules and whatnot. And then there's like all this other add-on kind of stuff that you can use to make the game more complex. So what I'll do is I'll set a goal. Even though I've done all this work, I'll set the goal to like I'm going to make the thin version of the game, like the 90-page thing. And then it was stretch goals to kind of add the other stuff in there. And so if I didn't, given that I was diving into Kickstarter, I had no idea how it was going to go. If I didn't get to that other stuff, it was just like, okay, well, I spent time on it. I can make PDFs later, or, you can do something.
Right. Yeah, that's smart.
And so I just went in with like $1,500 or $1,800 goal or something like that, just to get some artwork and layout work and everything to put the base stuff together. And then ultimately through stretch goals managed to cover everything. And that
will definitely be a topic later.
Yes, you're awesome.
Stretch goals.
Stretch goals.
So I took it as like I didn't want to overshoot. So I think that's a handy tip for people that are starting out, is to take something that you feel is manageable. And be realistic about what you think is manageable. Maybe ask some other people that will tell you the truth, and what you're comfortable with, because
exactly. And it never hurts.
Yeah,
Never
you're going to be
hurts to
putting
get other opinions.
absolutely, and you're going to be putting a lot of work into making the Kickstarter happen. So, like, if things don't go the way you want them to, I mean, and a failed Kickstarter is not a bad Kickstarter. It's just like you've built more audience at the very least.
It's failed.
You can.
I don't think that's accurate. I think, no offense, but I think that there are sides. So a failed Kickstarter can absolutely be a bad thing, especially when you have a failed Kickstarter and you launch your second Kickstarter. You have a relatively decent percentage of not doing as well because people can go, oh, well, all they have for experience is one failed Kickstarter, as opposed to if it's just your first Kickstarter, they're like, oh, they're new to this. They're not a big company. That's great. And it kind of gives you a warm fuzzy because you're supporting new people. Or you also, there's of course there's the people that are like, oh, they're new, I don't want to do it. But there
Zero
is
backed,
certainly
first created.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure, that's the whole thing too, you definitely want to make sure you back some Kickstarters on your account before you launch them. But it is important to note that it can actually hurt you to have a failed Kickstarter. Now, can you have a successful one after you have a failed one? Absolutely. And especially if you're like, Craig here's, a known name pretty much or whatever, then that helps too. And sometimes it's just like, oh, well, this is someone we all know. Obviously, they produce great material. So, of course, we're going to support them. They just had a bad run, or it was bad timing or whatever. So
messaging is huge on that.
Yeah, messaging is huge. So there's a lot of different things that go into determining whether or not a failed Kickstarter impacts you negatively or positively, but it can actually go either way, I think.
Sure. And bringing back around to the initial point too is like, go in with something that is manageable so you can mitigate the possibility of that happening.
That's brilliant advice.
If it's your first game, don't necessarily try to do something that's going to require 1,500 backers.
Yeah.
My bad.
It can work.
You can get lucky, but it's a gamble.
It's a gamble, absolutely.
And I've struggled with that because a lot of my projects I have a vision that has a budget, and that budget costs money, a lot of money. Baby Bestiary cost more than $25,000 to make.
It was a beautiful book, though.
Hyperlight Drifter. I got a lot of flack from people on Reddit. I don't know.
Oh, really? On Reddit?
Yeah, those people don't count, sweetie.
I know. Well, I mean,
count.
like, there are people who look at it and be like, oh, he's not, like, he's trying to make a company, not a product. And it's like, have you seen my last stuff? Like, this stuff ain't cheap. I'm making 2 books now, not 1. And part of that is my failure about minimum viable product. And something I struggle with a lot is going up against, my vision versus minimum viable product. So minimum viable product is,
I think all creatives do.
Yeah. And so, like, for some things, like, another conversation is setting an intentionally minimal goal, but that's so for me, my minimum viable product is I have a vision and I have a budget to create a thing, and that costs money. Unfortunately, I should probably scale that down for cheaper artists, cheaper text, I would say if you're going print, hardback versus softcover, make a decision. You don't want to switch because that cost change is going to be very weird and math-wise. I did that for Awakened, and it was very awkward to be like, no, all soft covers are now hardcover. Like, understand people. And some people still think they're getting a soft cover, which is very weird. I think one of the big things is, for that, when you're planning a product, plan out what your minimum viable product is. What is it with the least amount of art and the least amount of writing and design? And what does that budget look like? And then build up from there. Because once you show people your vision, you don't want to not be true to that, but you also want to make sure that you're funding something that you're going to be making. Like, we're going to have 8 card decks with 50 cards in each, What can we do to make this better? A box, or better art, or more design, better text. So there's a lot of like modular things that you can add to build off of that minimum viable product.
And then again, on the flip side, you have to be very careful because if you're suddenly like, oh, and you get specialized dice and t-shirts, that's going to cut a lot into your bottom line. Like, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. So be careful which products you're adding on.
And shipping.
Oh God, yeah.
So
shipping and taxes. There's just so much. There's so many. It's a huge thing. You can't possibly give a 1 hour or 2 hour call and be like, this is everything there's to know about
Oh,
Kickstarter.
yeah.
I think the biggest advice that can be given to new people is find a professional and get their advice, because you're going to need it. I know that there are several people in the industry like myself that do consultations. So if you can just pay someone for an hour or 2 hours or an afternoon of their time, pick their brain, write it down, take notes, you'll find yourself in a much better location.
Study successful projects.
Study successful projects.
Less is more to start out with, especially when you're starting. You don't want to do t-shirts, posters, prints, unless you tchotchkes. Yes, you can do them, but remember that you have to ship them in the end. And so if it doesn't fit in the box that your main product is going in, it's going to be more.
Right. Well, and yeah, absolutely. And then you've got to think about the manufacturing costs and that, and the fluctuations and that, and everything else. I think, again, research is key. If you have friends who have run a Kickstarter, then, that are willing to give you free advice too, that's another one that's huge. And you can Google like which products are going well and which products aren't, although you do have to be careful, because despite what people think, Google research is not always accurate. But certainly if you look at some of the bigger Kickstarters, you'll find that in the early days of Kickstarter, everybody was like, yeah, here's a t-shirt. Yeah, here's some dice, and now you'll notice that you don't see that as often. You still do occasionally on the bigger ones, but it's less and less and less that you see those, because you know what? People are there for the product. The extra t-shirt is costing you more money than it's actually gaining you customers.
When you're saying Googling products, sorry, just to bounce off of a question from chat, Googling products, are you talking about Googling related products, like related TTRPG products, or like related campaigns? Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, so I meant like if you feel like you can't afford in your budget to hire a professional to either manage your Kickstarter or give you advice or whatever, then if you have friends who have done Kickstarters, absolutely, that's a great place to start for advice. But be careful not to just steal all your friends' time for free, because that's also, I get a lot of friends that ask me advice about Kickstarters, and I will help them for about 15 minutes, unless they're like my dear, close, personal family member almost type friends. And then I'm like, okay, this is how I make money. But Google can help you. You can research like other Kickstarters, other similar products. So if you have a book and your book is a tabletop RPG, because that's what we work in, then research and look over, all the other successful ones like the Baby Beast series or Monty Cook Games books, or other, companies who have done successful Kickstarters. If you're marketing a new robot, looking at tabletop Kickstarter books probably isn't going to help you much. So just...
I don't know, but there'll be definitely an interesting story about it.
That's true.
if you're planning to kickstart as well, keep in mind that you're probably, hopefully, planning for this well in advance of the Kickstarter.
Oh,
and as you prepare for all of that stuff, that's the time to start looking at what Kickstarters are doing well and what they're doing in order to do well. Like you should. When I did the first Kickstarter, I spent a year studying Kickstarter up and down, finding every single bit of advice that I could, because I had zero money to give to someone like BJ. And I did garner some advice from some people, but there are all sorts of online resources. There's all sorts of stuff you can pull together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's
like,
a lot
I don't
of
mind if
sense.
people. Yeah, a lot of common sense. Well, and I don't mind if people ask the occasional question, because I really like to help people when they're starting out. Like that's always been a thing of mine. We hire people that no one knows at PG to write stuff for that reason. But there are levels, and sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself if you can't afford to hire a professional is just go research and read.
Put the time in.
Put the time in.
And
if you can't afford to put the money, put in the same time that the rest of us did, to get here.
Yeah, and a lot of creators do actually do like post-Kickstarter postmortems, like
Owen Casey Stevens, he posts a lot of advice and things like that. A lot of people do.
Yeah, and it's like Stone Mariner Games for Scythe. They've done a lot of blog posts about like their experience in shipping and fulfillment, their experience in development. There's a lot of good information, especially when you're looking at shipping internationally.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I mean, for a first project, you don't have to do a physical product. It sometimes helps your numbers to have a physical product, but you don't have to. Especially if you're just
a physical product.
What was that?
You don't ever have to do a physical product.
That is true.
That's true.
If that's the scale you want to work at. You can put up really cool little PDFs. People got their tablets and their computers. They're ready to go.
Right. That's true. People, actually more and more you see just PDF only things being kickstarted. I think, the overall answer to the topic though is just that you can either hire somebody or you can do the research, but make sure that you're doing one or the other. You can't just start and throw everything up there and hope for the best. I mean, you can, but it's not advisable and probably is not going to work out for the best.
Yeah. No, one of the things actually would be really interesting is, so when you're starting a Kickstarter, when you're starting a Kickstarter, the first thing is usually being silent about a Kickstarter is, for most like early small creators, just doing like, poof, it's alive, back it, doesn't work.
No.
Like it works for big companies that have audiences built in. Like
it's true.
Monty Cook Games can, drop something out of nowhere and everyone's going to be excited for it because he has an audience that will receive it. For something like, if I don't have an audience, like I have a relatively small audience, like, my mailing list is only 4,000 people, which I think is fairly large, but
the next time you do a Kickstarter, I have a mailing list with like 100,000 people on it. I'm happy to,
I appreciate it. I'll pay you in owlbears.
Oh, no, I'm good with that, actually. I do love owlbears.
But I don't have
We can work
owlbears.
something out.
Craig will get you an owlbear too.
Sweet.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
I'll buy an extra one so I can give it to BJ when she wants to help with the next project.
It'll be a BJ
I do
currency.
accept payment in
This
stuffies.
mound of owlbears.
But when you don't have a large audience or you have a small following, like, like I have not had a large following on Twitter for a long time.
I'm
when
bad
I came
about
onto Twitter, G+, wherever we lived at the time, post 2020, rip G+. But like wherever you are, like you need to share. And I know Craig's been doing a great job with this with Capers in terms of like sharing the development.
Because I have no idea what you're talking about. What is Capers?
It's just
I did such a great job sharing it with everybody.
Sorry, I'm in your sphere.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing too. Like I know you've been pushing Capers. I know I every so often try to push Owlbear Plush every so often, the Kickstarter sign up page for it. And I'm sure BJ hasn't seen it. Precisely. Like I've showed her a picture like a year ago.
I remember that, but I mean, like in my feeds or anything now, I haven't seen it. But to be fair to both of you, all joking aside, I really have been nose down. I had like this, I did, I recently wrote in an AP adventure for Starfinder, for example. And while you normally get 6 months to do that, I had a 1 month deadline for an entire adventure.
Yeesh.
And then I had some other like editing deadlines and things like that. So and then trying to get the new company off the ground, it could have been right in my face and I wouldn't have seen it.
This goes to show, people will miss things. And there's just because you post it 2 times, once a day, doesn't mean everyone will see it. And
no, because Facebook algorithms especially will mess you up on that. So if you aren't incredibly familiar and taking the updated classes and stuff to ensure that you understand how the algorithms work and how they've changed in the last 5 minutes, there's a good chance that all your advertising is going to waste and nobody's really seeing it anyway. So it's all about wording and having other people interact. There's huge
organic
things you
reach.
can do. Well, and Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, all those places are important. I know when people go and they look me up, they're like, okay, but I've seen your Twitter and you've made 17 posts in the entire life of the account. Listen, do as I say, not as I am bad about Twitter. I get so busy helping other people manage their stuff. I don't have time to maintain my own.
I personally
like
just
the
recently
mechanic in his car.
I have actually had to hire someone to do social media posts for Metal Weave Games because
I'm sorry, wait, you hired somebody and you didn't come to me? Shame on
you.
you.
They're scheduling posts. Like they're doing posts to
That's
just
amazing.
keep the count. So, and same with the Baby Bestiary
A lot of
too.
people do.
For the Baby Bestiary Facebook page, because I can find cute art, but I'm not taking the time to schedule them. Or do the research to find the artist information, all that stuff. So
and interact with everybody too, because there's so many things you have to do. It's not just about, I've made a post. You got to go back and you have to interact with the people on the post. You have to, if you're smart, you'll share it in places. And then there's going and asking each of those people who liked or commented to also like your page. It's actually a very time consuming endeavor.
And so like getting like social media is a lot. There's a lot to do, and getting your word
true.
out there, just sharing it once a day is not enough usually.
No.
So
You kind of got to make a nuisance of yourself for a month.
yeah,
I have
and
like
it's
a
okay.
14,
And it's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. I have like a 14-page PDF of all the places where I put stuff when I'm managing a Kickstarter. So believe me, one share on social media a day is not enough. There's banners, there's blogs, there's newsletters, there's emails and obviously Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and
blogs was one of the things that, like, when I first started, I was reaching out to a bunch of review blogs to be like, hey,
that's
like
smart.
I've got a thing, like, hey, you've got a blog, I've got this Kickstarter project, you've reported on Kickstarter stuff in the past, like, let's talk about my product, like, I want to give you content and promote what I'm doing. And usually that might be an interview, might be just a text interview. Go find people who write for EN World, find people who write for
I was just going to suggest EN World. That's a good one.
There's a lot of places. EN World is a big tabletop RPG hub.
Well, and there's
Jonathan
Nelson's thing. He does AEW games, but he's got the website he does a lot of reviews and stuff like that, and that's a good place. I usually send stuff there, but you certainly should. Craig, what is your number one must do if I'm running a Kickstarter? What is the first place that comes to mind for where I'm going to advertise?
Oh boy. I mean, for RPGs, like the thing that, like EN World gets a post 10 minutes after the Kickstarter launches.
Right.
RPG Geek, RPG Net, Role Players Chronicle, Geek Native, Geek Tyrant. There's all sorts of places that just kind of report news.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can find a dozen or more places just with RPG review, RPG, just Googling RPG review, RPG
Google.
blog, RPG, that sort of thing. You can get a handful that way.
Bloggers.
Go to the websites, find what their submission processes are. It's often just like fill a form or here, send us an email.
Right.
Learn how to write a press release, so that for those places that ask for specifically a press release that kind of reads like a press release, and be prepared to give them a link to where there's some imagery or to the Kickstarter page itself, and something that they can use to populate their page. Like if you send them the image, or if they ask for we want a place where we can pull the image from, put it on Imgur, and just have it available.
Yeah, no,
good advice.
Bloggers, podcasters, YouTube, there's so many different aspects of the industry, and you have to look for them. I've done a terrible job looking for them after the baby bestiary. And that's my fault, because I needed to start creating a list of, people to send press releases to and stuff like that. Mailing lists are good, and I've done a terrible job managing my mailing list. And so that's something I've been bringing up more, and that constant contact is really important. Also, if you've had stuff on DriveThruRPG, you can reach out to DriveThruRPG to ask if you can send a promotional email to your purchasers. And
you can send two.
Yeah, you can send more than one. But
you can send two, and you can include a link. It's one of the few times that you can actually put a link to another place in a DriveThruRPG message.
That is accurate. And the drive-thru people are really great about helping you out.
And they'll help you, put an image together and some nice text, and they'll embed the link in the image, and
No lie. I once texted Meredith over there while I was running out the door. Oh my God, I forgot to send a newsletter. Can you please send one for me? And she straight up went and sent a newsletter for me. Those people are my heroes. I would not advise doing that all the time. They're very busy. But please don't take that as advice. Write your own newsletter. But I mean, they really are there, and they care about their publishers, and they're there to help, and they're there to give advice. They're very good at that.
Yeah, and then on the fulfillment side, usually that requires you to do fulfillment through DriveThruRPG. Which isn't a terrible thing. They have a very easy system. You paste emails into a form, and then you just press send, and everyone gets sent a discount code or their discount product added to their library. So it's very easy. I mean, obviously doing it through your own website might have mixed results depending on your size. I don't recommend it as someone who has done that.
I think if you're any kind of like small publisher, then you're probably better off running it through Drive-Through RPG. But there are still arguments to be made for printing your own books. For example, if you have a large Kickstarter and you've got
Oh,
like
yeah. 1,000
books needing printed,
Oh.
going to save you money every time to go to a real printer and have it printed.
Oh yeah.
Shop
Reevaluate your
around, but
costs.
it's true. Absolutely. And constantly be doing that. So what I always advise is when you're doing a Kickstarter, everybody's like, okay, let's decide what we're going to do, where we're going to print it. And I always say that you should actually pick three. You should, if your Kickstarter just barely funds, where are you going to print it? If your Kickstarter does what you consider to be midway, then where are you going to print it? If your Kickstarter just shoots through the roof and you get one of those $1 million Kickstarters, again, where are you going to print it? Because those are things that you need to have and you need to know in advance. And people are like, well, if it hits $1 million, then it doesn't matter. That's not true. Because once you get up there in funds, you've got your taxes to worry about, the percentages coming off of it, more books to print, prices change. So you actually do need to know right out the gate where in these three categories you are going to manage your product.
Speaking of $1 million Kickstarters, I looked at, I did the math on Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers, and I was like, holy crap, he paid $500,000 to Kickstarter in the Kickstarter fees.
Yup.
And so Kickstarter, you essentially lose, can I get printed in foil? So like for Kickstarter, usually they take 3%, 1 to 2 or no, they take 5%, 2 to 3% gets lost in credit card transaction fees. You're essentially losing 10%. Like
assume 10, yeah.
Just assume
At
10
least.
flat out. If you want to use BackerKit, and I highly recommend using, depending on how many items you have or post-sales items you have, I would recommend using a pledge manager. That typically is BackerKit is a popular one. There are others, but not as popular.
BackerKit is probably one of the best ones out there.
And
if you have to use a manager, that's the way to go.
If you have, there are others. I'm not quite like CrowdOx exists. There's another one for TTRPGs that I believe, not Pathfinder, another company used them. There are others out there.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I didn't Paizo used it, I thought.
Yeah,
or
I don't
no,
remember.
Or maybe Legendary used it for
someone used there was another one that been kind of popping up because people don't want to pay the 2 to 3% of their Kickstarter campaign.
Well, it's not just that actually. There was this big to do about a Kickstarter's union. So everybody was sort of boycotting Kickstarter for a while. And that's all fixed now, and Kickstarter's great again, as far as I know. But people were looking for other crowdfunding sites, and there's one out there. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, other crowdfunding or other pledge manager?
Well, it's other crowdfunding, and I thought that
Indiegogo.
No, it's like Game on Tabletop or something like that.
Oh, the other TTRPG pledge.
And I was thinking they had like a crowdfunding and integrated pledge manager, or they're talking about it.
I think they do. That's the one that gets a lot of play in Europe. There's a strong European presence with it.
Oh yeah, because the people that did the French Baby Bestiary, I think, used it.
Yeah, so it's quite popular. So you know your audience. If that's something, if you're in Europe, if you're in Europe, that's something you might want to think of. And please don't quote me, but I believe they have their own pledge managing software.
And so if you and when we say if you need to use a pledge manager, this typically comes down to if you want your backers to upgrade specifically or buy more stuff that's outside of the scope of the Kickstarter. Typically these are add-ons or other products you've already made. If that is the case, BackerKit is worth it. I tried using my own website for this once in lieu of BackerKit, and I had very interesting results. Partially because people thought that using the website was like the book was done. And they didn't understand that, they had an understanding that BackerKit was still pre-order / like it's not done yet. Whereas when they came to the website, my website, they thought it was like done already and like, oh, when's the shipping? And it's like, it's not done yet. Like, do you not read the updates? Like,
yeah.
So if you choose to use your own website, send out stuff when the book is done. Otherwise, if you're using a pledge manager, you can get people into a pledge manager whenever, because you can charge cards for all the extra add-ons and stuff like that, charge shipping, whatever. Kickstarter does have its own survey tool. It's fairly limited, but it is set up by backer level. So if you have any add-ons, it's not worth it. But if you're not doing add-ons, it is very easy to use. You have like, it asks for people's address. People can update their address. You can have yes or no questions if you want people to subscribe to your mailing list through that form, which is a very good idea to do. Every Kickstarter you run, ask if people want to be signed up to your mailing list. And again, this comes back to having a mailing list. You should probably have a mailing list if you're using Kickstarter and plan to do so in the future.
It's true. Yeah, and your first Kickstarter mailing list can help boost your second Kickstarter.
Very much so. And if you have multiple Kickstarters, be sure to ping them every so often that you've like got some. I feel terrible about bugging them all the time about new stuff, but it doesn't hurt to do like one post or 2 posts a year to them, like my baby bestiary, because it's been 4 years since I've run that project. But it's good to post them every so often because some of them might not follow my mailing list.
Well, and if you've started a new Kickstarter, and if you've started a new Kickstarter, and your old Kickstarter was both successful and you did not anger your customers, you can go back and be like, hey, new Kickstarter, if you loved one, come back to, that kind of thing.
Let's talk about angering our backers. Or things to do to not anger your backers.
I can think of quite a few things. Communication, for the love of God, please communicate. And I say that with a great deal of experience of how badly that can go. Not from anything I've ever run, but working for companies where I'm forced to listen to what they want to do to handle their Kickstarter versus what I would do. It can be so frustrating. So if you have the freedom to do what you want because it is your Kickstarter, then the best thing you can do is communicate. If you're going to be late on a Kickstarter, let people know. Don't hide in a hole. Don't be like, oh my God, I'll get it done next month, so I'm just not going to say anything. Don't do that. If you are 5 days after your Kickstarter ends and you already know I am going to be late, that's the first thing you need to do is you need to communicate to your backers. Look, here's the situation.
More communication's better, honestly.
More is
obviously
better.
Once a month is like the standard cadence.
I actually don't think that's true. I think they prefer to have weekly updates or bi-weekly updates. Once a month is enough to, if you're,
it depends on the scale of the project.
Exactly. If you are a big project, if you're Stefan over at Dwarven Forge or something like that, yeah, sure. Once a month, every 3 months, we know we're going to get our stuff, whatever. But if you're new, giving bi-weekly updates at a minimum can be important, because there's a lot of customers that, especially if it's a brand new project that's an unknown, if they don't hear from you for a month, they're like, well, where's my money? I just want to check in. Where's my money?
Where's my product?
Where's my product? Are you still doing it? Even though they know your product isn't due till next year, they want to see something that says, hi, we're still here. We haven't run off your money with your money. So again, like everything else, there's not one answer. It's tailored to your product, your brand, your business. And if you're small, bi-weekly at the very least. Don't wait
and I've
for
been guilty of that too. Not like, because like when shit gets busy, like I definitely do the get down and focus, and then try to finish stuff up or get stuff done, get stuff out the door, and it's hard to get yourself to come to these people and say like, hey, it's not done. It's a hard thing to make yourself do, to say true. Like it's a hard, because it's like you're not bringing good news. Essentially.
Yeah, everybody wants to be the bearer of good news. But whether you're, talking about work or Kickstarters or anything, there is a aspect of human nature that says, if I failed at something, I don't want to come out and say anything. Or even if I haven't failed, if I'm just busy and I don't have anything exciting to say, I don't want to come out and say something. And especially in creatives can often be incredibly reclusive. We don't like people. So it's easier, I think, for creatives to hide in their hole, in their blanket fort with their crayons and colors and make their stuff and not want to get out there and actually give an update. And you have to give the update. It's important. Set a reminder in your calendar if you have to. If you have nothing to say, make something up. Be like, well, this is what I've been working on. If it's just, I've been writing, fine, I've been writing, whatever it is, but give some kind of update that basically just says, still here, haven't run off with your money. That's what they want to know.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Product's still coming.
Even just showing like a page layout, a piece of art that's come
Yep.
in. Like people enjoy art show offs. Like, and also while running the project too, post updates. Like because
absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even, that's so common sense. I didn't even think to say it. It's so common knowledge. Like that's something everybody knows, but they don't, you know, you think of it as something everybody knows, but you have to update during your Kickstarter.
And it's like when to do the first update too, because like, obviously, like if you don't fund your first day, you're like, way, like, you know, I know my first inclination is to do like, all right, first day, we got this far, you know, let's keep doing this. Let's, you know, be positive. Yeah. You got to come at it with a positive outlook, but you don't want to be silent. Because then less people are going to come to your project and be like, oh, this person's given up already.
Yes, that's exactly right.
He shot it out in the dark, hoped it funded that day, and it didn't, and now he's just being quiet.
Yeah, I think an update in the first 24 hours is actually pretty crucial. If you really have to let it go 48, fine. But I would say I really think it's crucial to have it in the first 24.
Invent a reason inside of 12 hours. You know, hey, we're 30%.
Yeah. There you go.
Something positive, something to just make everybody feel positive, to remind them that they just backed this thing, and maybe a handful of those people will go and share your Kickstarter.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly right. So, and that's what I was trying to say about if you really have to wait 48, you know, that's fine, or over 24, that's fine. But being within the first 24 hours is crucial, and that's because you shouldn't be thinking of it as, oh, end of day, I didn't fund, what am I going to post? You should be thinking about it like 6, 12, 18 hours in, I'm not quite there. How do I push it over the edge? So once you have backers, obviously more than one or two, but if you've gotten your Kickstarter 30% funded or 40% funded, that's a great time too. So you're 8 hours in, it's 35% funded. I'm going to email my backers and be like, we're doing great. We're this percentage there. Don't forget to share with your friends, share on social media, da, 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 da. Another thing you can do, which works weirdly well, is you can do like some kind of strange points thing, whether it's a digital wallpaper or a giveaway of an old PDF. Be like, hey, if this many people share this post on Facebook, or this many people share this post on Twitter, you can do badges.
Social stretch goals.
They love badges. So if you have like a little profile pic for Facebook or a banner to put up on Facebook pages and be like, hey, you can put this here so your friends know about it. Well, then all their friends just watch them change their profile pic to be a cute little owl bear. It's and that's some of the things that I do when I'm running a Kickstarter for people, is I take their art and I turn it into those things that they can share for social goals. And you would be surprised how much those social goals can make a difference day one.
Oh yeah, no, a great example I think that comes to mind was A Pillion by Magpie Games. They did some stuff where it was like draw your dragon, or like having some community involvement that involved
community involvement is huge.
People to they had social stretch goals. I think they did a lot of research on Monty Cook Games social stretch goals, and with that they had little badges. They had like, we're trying to reach this many followers on Twitter, we're trying to reach this many followers on Facebook. Reshares.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and sometimes and make them feasible too, and what you're giving when you hit those goals. I think nowadays a big thing is you list all of the goals, and then you have like a little track of achievements or rewards that you can give your backers for that. Because shares on, like, you need organic growth, and if you don't have the social and backer environment to, or if you don't have the audience to push that, you need to start getting other people to reach for you.
Yes, that is very true. Yeah, I just think it's crucial that in the first 24 hours that you're making a post, because you're more likely to reach that one-day funding. And one-day funding is great, but if you don't fund on day one, that doesn't mean you're not going to fund. As long as you continue to communicate with your backers, show excitement, post a live video on Facebook, or do an excited post on your Kickstarter. But as long as you're excited about it, if you can show that excitement to other people, they're going to be drawn in. They're going to be like, oh my God, this person's so excited to make this thing. Sometimes the person who's making something is a better sell than the product even. There have been Kickstarters I have backed, not even fully understanding what I'm backing or buying, or even caring if I get it, because I'm like, that person has such a passion for their product. I just want to support that. Here's $20, whatever. And there's so many aspects of how you can make money on Kickstarters. All kinds of little things to think about.
Another thing to think about, or at least that I'm thinking about right now, is shoot. Where am I going with this?
Be more organized than we are. Have somebody to ask questions with a list. That's
No. Yeah, be more prepared than I am for this panel. No.
We need an Owen. He's the best at keeping panels on track.
Oh, I bet. Yes, that's what I was gonna look at. A Kickstarter video. I've been mixed about Kickstarter videos. I believe they do a lot of good. If you spend the time to develop a Kickstarter. So I've run a bunch of products where I don't have a Kickstarter video, from the calendars to even, I believe, no, all of my major projects have had videos. All my large number projects have had videos. All my smaller project ones have not.
Maybe that's why they're smaller projects.
That's probably why. Because my calendar projects are only going to be 5 to 12K. I don't need more money for them, and I don't want to spend the several days to make a video for it.
Well, that's fair. I mean, if that's
and I don't have the art yet.
So here's the thing. That is another do as I say, probably not as I do. So while that has worked for you and may work for also smaller Kickstarters, the 98% of the time advice is do a video. Even if it's a 5-minute video on your phone or a 2-minute video on your 5 minutes is actually pretty long. If it's a 2-minute video on your phone, then that's great. But a video is very important.
Especially for your first project.
It does. I think Craig has something to say on that, right?
Yeah, if I'm of the mind that if you go to a Kickstarter page, there's like 7 or 8 different things on that Kickstarter page, and you should do every single one of them. Because every one of those is going to turn, if you don't do it, is going to turn somebody off. If there's not at least a piece of artwork, one piece of artwork, or the game logo. If you have not backed any projects and you're creating your first one, back some project, show that you're invested in the community. Do it.
Even if it's $1.
Just like every little thing that you do, because there's going to be somebody that's going to show up and say, these people don't even have a video. They're not serious.
Exactly.
And they'll do that for anything. They'll say this person's only hasn't backed any projects. They're just here to make a buck.
Well, that's it. So
do everything.
Well, the baby bestiary calendars are great. He's really probably only getting money from the people who was already going to buy it anyway. He's not bringing in new revenue or new fans because he didn't do check all the boxes.
Yeah, the $6,000 or $7,000 Kickstarter. You saying you didn't do a video for that because that's small for you? That's my big Kickstarter. That's the one where I make the best video. Well, like my bigger ones, like I've done $10 or $11,000 or $12,000 for print books for offset.
Oh yeah, books. Well, and print books, and that's true. It depends.
Yeah, there's only one time that I didn't do a Kickstarter video, and that was for a 4-day Kickstarter where I did like $1,500 to make 4 little games and put them in a booklet. It was an experiment.
Oh, okay.
Can I fund a little thing like this? Can I do a 4-day Kickstarter and raise $1,500 to get some artwork done?
Yeah, you'd be surprised the things that fun. Because I swear to y'all, I backed a Kickstarter once that was basically like, it was the $1 Kickstarter. What was that? And I backed it just because it was hilariously done. I backed it at like threw $10 at it or something. And now I get the most hilarious updates about their lack of fulfillment. You'd be surprised what people will back if it's done right. It's ridiculous.
Potato salad.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. Like all those things, like if you don't do it, like that is a potential turnoff for someone. Like you nailed that on the head.
Video is huge.
And a video especially for first projects, and especially for any future projects. I know for all my big projects, I do a video. And warranted, that's like I should do it for all of them. I need to do one for my owlbear.
You're leaving money on the table. You're leaving money on the table. For your owlbear, just have one made, send it to me. I'll squee about it all over video, and you're just there. You're done.
I only have one.
And Chris,
because I need to mass produce them. It's the prototype.
Send it to me.
just a quick note on the video thing too is like people were asking like, what are the videos? What do you put in your first one? You'd be amazed at what you can get away with in your videos for stuff like I'm already I've got an idea for Andreas's owlbear plush video, which is literally just a hand holding the little owlbear. You're off screen talking in a squeaky owlbear voice, and you sell the video and you sell the plush to somebody that way. I mean, you could do something that people will remember that. It's simple, it's silly, it shows that you're kind of having fun with it, you're passionate.
Yes.
Yeah. And for my
you can do like, you see these board game things where it's like 3-dimensional and things are moving. What was it Misspent Youth? What game was it that it was like literally somebody was walking around with their camera talking and they were taking shots of, they had posted like, they had,
it sounds
like
yes.
they had stapled like, it looked like, like what you would do to staple up a poster, an 8.5 by 11 poster of a concert.
Yes, I remember
telephone
that.
poles and stuff. And it was just them walking around to all these prepared spots where they were telling me
Swear
about
to
the
God.
game, and it had artwork from the game, and it looked great. It was like, I'm on board. That's absolutely
Anything
really
that's
cool.
unique or makes me laugh, and I'm there. If it makes me laugh, I'm there. But I mean, literally, you could just be like, so this little guy here, I call my QB. This is actually a dice bag, which I absolutely love. I have my little dice in there, my set of green ones, my Eric dice. So I love gelatinous cubes. That's a big thing. So this is from Whimsyworks, and people have bought this literally just because I've been standing around going, oh my God, look at this, it's so cute. It really doesn't, just a video, any video.
Yeah.
This is adorable. It's the cutest little thing, and it's soft and squishy, and I want to hug it. And I can store my dice in it.
And look at other projects too. Like, I know for my very, very first video, it was like, hi, I'm Andreas. I'm making non-player cards. Wrong hand. Making non-player cards. Here are like my prototype ones. And then I went into a video showing like art assets and scrolling and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I've done them where it's just basically somebody talking at a desk with a little bit of humor thrown in and the occasional blip on a screen because that's all they could afford, and they didn't want to pay me to do any like fancy stuff. But again, even the videos that you might be sitting there thinking, well, this isn't great is better than none. It's 100% accurate. You've got to have a video. If you really are so incapable of talking on film, which is, it's difficult. It's difficult to know you're being recorded.
I did
like,
so
hold
many
up a
takes.
sign.
I did so many takes. Oh my God. Because I don't work off a script. I ad-lib it, and then if I messed up, I have to go redo it, or I re-clip it, and then,
Right. Well, and I've done ads for people where they're like, yeah, I know what I want to say, but I can't do it. And the takes are too much, and it's their anxiety. So like, you could literally like say I'm again selling Whimsyworks little dude here. You can put scrolling words on the side. So say like right here where my hand is, you'd have scrolling words, and then doing this and having like interaction. So if that says something exciting, you can be like, or whatever. You can just be an emoji for the words that are scrolling on the screen. Seriously, it works. There's so many ways that you can make a video, and you can make it be something that people will stop and make it different that they'll look at. But even if you can't be different, and all you're going to do is sit there and be like, this is my thing, this is why I'm doing it, please back my project, I can't do it without you. That just couple seconds of sincerity is going to be more important than a blank image with no
also something that mentioned in chat, also have an editor look over your text, your Kickstarter page text. Like,
that's everything. Everything needs an editor. Life needs an editor. If you have made a product, I guarantee you need an editor. Go hire one now.
No, very much so. And the last part, I guess I'll go into, since we're already past time, and looks like BJ's out of coffee, so we're definitely out of time. No. Is when you're trying to do a game, having rules available. So having like playtest rules, having finished rules. From running Drifter, I didn't put out a playtest until like a week in, and it wasn't as polished as probably people might have wanted it to be. I felt like I fell on a sword that people wanted to see a playtest right away. I talked about what the system would do, but I was still designing the system. I probably should have delayed that Kickstarter a month or 2 months, because people wanted to see the mechanics in action and see the mechanics.
Well, I think that actually plays into another crucial part about Kickstarters is we understand that a lot of Kickstarters start as a prototype, so you don't really have anything but your sketched up image that you want the money to be able to make. But in the tabletop RPG industry, more often than not, you have some things written. You want to try to have the bulk of your project done. If you can't afford art, that's fine. If you can't afford a layout designer, that's fine. That's why you're hosting your Kickstarter. But if you are the author on the project, have the bulk of your stuff done beforehand, because that's less surprises down the road. And even if you're not the author, if you can afford to have a lot of it done ahead of time, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes that's just the reality. Sometimes you're like, this is the thing I want to do. Maybe that's not actually,
because I have big budget projects, which I'm still amazed I can fund sometimes.
Yeah, and you pay me a decent wage when I write for you. So for our industry,
tell me how much you cost, and I'll pay.
And he's been, I do quote you a little cheaper because I just love the baby bestiary, but your rates have been absolutely reasonable. And I know that has to be hard with figuring that into the budget. But I think, again, if you can have stuff done in advance, it's important to be able to show something off.
My problem is I'm not a writer, and I'm not an editor, and I'm not an artist.
Is there something else I can help with?
Huh?
It was my Siri.
Did I say okay, Google? No.
No, it was Siri. I don't know what her deal was. She was trying to help you do something.
Oh. But like for me, I'm a ideas guy. I'm a project manager, and I do some stuff I do a bunch of layout. And so for me, writing is hard. Design is relatively hard. I mean, I do a lot of design work, but I'm not doing the bulk of the writing. Most of the Baby Bestiaries, I didn't write a word of the Baby Bestiary. I wrote the introduction and then maybe some prompts for a bunch of people.
Oh, okay.
The rest of it was done by every collaborator that I had on the project. And with that, I have to factor in a budget for everyone. And so for me, showing off a prototype of what that project is, I have to front load that. I have to front load 20% of my design and my art and my layout to understand what the product will look like. And I think nowadays backers kind of expect that you're going to have like a complete vision and a prototype, or even just a vision, like a sample layout. This is what a page is going to look like. Even if it's not the final, like I know non-player cards, that design changed like 5 times.
Oh yeah.
And I used papyrus on my headers for my very first project. And
it wasn't Comic Sans.
That is true. Oh, Evie, can you grab the owlbear?
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
Stuffy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like
I think Craig was trying to say something.
If you can have as much as possible, so that you've got something to show, and if it's a small project and you're in the position to be able to have with the supplements for capers, I paid for the artwork up front and then reimbursed myself.
And that's great if you can do it.
And covered layout and editing and everything afterwards. And so that way I was able to turn a project around. Like here's your
No, hold it up again.
Here's your 76-page book in 3 months.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, I mean, the reality is sometimes you can't.
Yeah, and you can't. And sometimes, like, I've had projects that have taken longer, but like if you can turn something around really quick, one way to, like we were talking about communication, and one way to make your backers happy, turn a project around quickly. If you can do everything you can to make that happen.
Oh yeah.
So one of the things, and that's absolutely, early delivery is huge. So one of the things I recommend is put your Kickstarter 6 months out of when you can actually deliver it. The other thing I recommend is that if you have never, his head keeps getting cut off. Oh my God, that poor Owlbear. If you've never had a project before and you want to just start out, if you have something that's basically done, you've written, do a tiny Kickstarter for it. Be like, here, the goal is $1,500. Here's the small thing I'm doing. It's already almost done. I just need the money to do art or whatever it is. Then that'll help get you in the public eye. The reality is that you should be able to go to Kickstarter with a prototype, with an idea, and have it crowdfunded and go make it. You should. That's how it all started out. But in reality, you can't, because so many companies have started using it as a pre-order platform that is now what the consumers expect.
Look at board
games. You to be, they expect it to be 3/4 of the way done before you ever take it to Kickstarter. So while we can all sit around all day and wail about how that's not fair, it's still the reality.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Like board games nowadays, like you have to have like 3 reviews by like notable board game reviewers before you even kickstart it.
Yep.
And I mean, they're huge budget items, but like, holy crap, like they want the game done. Like you should be able to go to production like the next month or like finish like some write out, and like board game. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
People want their products really, really soon. And I have backed some amazing projects that I waited a year to get. Like I had forgotten I backed them and they showed up, and I'm more patient, I guess, about it, but a lot of consumers are not. They want their stuff. If you are on 2 weeks before delivery is supposed to be stated, stated on your Kickstarter, the people are out there are wanting to know, are you still doing this? Is it coming out? Are we going to get it on time? You don't need, like, seriously, you always want to pad your numbers, give yourself more time, because you're going to have a flaky author or a printing error or production issues. There will be a problem. There is always a problem. Prepare for there to be a problem.
And like from printing to shipping is like 3 months in its own. Like if you're building a Kickstarter schedule, like just build in a lost half year almost just to get in your books.
It's true.
Because like, true. Yeah, it's I mean, especially if you're doing offshore printing, which is kind of standard offset, full production run. Like printing is like ask for recommendations on printers, find friends, get quotes.
Be careful.
Be careful.
Definitely ask around, do your research.
Get a fulfillment partner, or like ask around, figure out who other people are using for their
get
shipping.
Things in writing.
Doing it yourself, although sounds like fun, you're gonna have to do it. And I know, like,
it's also not fun.
It sounds like fun, but when you get a pallet of books in your garage, if you have a garage, like you need to package and ship all of those, print all the labels. It will take you a while.
Disclaimer, if you have 6 kids, just have it delivered to your garage and put them to work. But
you want allowance? This is how you get it.
I built my own warehouse team.
That's hilarious.
No, we use shipping fulfillment. I don't do that, but I always threaten, I'm gonna do something to make you all just work as fulfillment.
And show off your collaborators and artists. Like,
give
everyone a bio.
Important. Yeah,
give everyone a bio that participates. Like, those people will help sell your project as well.
Diversity. That's a whole other panel on its own.
Oh yeah, that too. Like, get other people to work on your game if you are getting people to work on it.
And never be afraid to take advice. Like, we all need advice. Like, my advice to you, Andreas, is the next time you do a panel, be a little more organized, because this is like Kickstarter randomness. I don't even know what I would title it. But
this is the least organized of my other two. Yeah.
But the point is there's no reason to have some people, if I'd said that to some people, they would have very hurt feelings. And sometimes it's important to set those feelings aside and be able to take the constructive criticism, because you're going to get that. If you cannot have a thick enough skin to take the constructive criticism, you're probably not ready to step out in the world yet, because you're going to get it. And you're going to get ones that are not even accurate. You're going to have to, trolls. There will be trolls. Reddit. Be prepared for that. Oh my God. My advice is don't look at Reddit or 4chan or I did want to do a 4chan thing. Somebody invited me to do a 4chan interview. And I, at the time, didn't know what 4chan was. I'd never heard of it because I don't play on those sides of the web. And it was a couple years ago, and it was actually very cute. So I went in not knowing what I was getting into, and everybody was like, oh, it's so-and-so. She's here. Everyone was polite. They were well-mannered. I had not a problem one. As soon as they thought I was gone, they reverted to normal. And I was like,
wow.
I just had forgotten to close the window. And I was like, and so I Googled this place. I'm like, oh my God, wow, they were really well behaved. I've never been back. I had no idea what it was. It was really bizarre. But yeah, it's a scary place. Don't go to 4chan. It's weird.
That's usually good general internet advice. Don't go.
Yeah, no. I'm still not 100% sure what that was, but they had like their own game area on 4chan or something. And I just, I was trying to be nice. And again, they were all polite. They all watched their language. There was no cursing. Their questions were polite. A strange anomaly within the force over there. I don't know, but yeah. And Reddit is probably another one of those. Don't take advice from people on Reddit. A lot of them have nothing better to do with their time than go be hateful. And
a lot of them have never done a project.
It's true. Like, random strangers probably trust your advisors, your friends, your people with degrees.
Someone thought I was kickstarting Drifter, which I was kickstarting for $65K. Thought I was running away with $10K profit.
Where did that randomness come from? Unknown? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, where do you think I'm, like, do you know what my costs are? Like
also, even if you are, you have to get paid too. And I guarantee you that Kickstarter was a lot more than 30 days worth of work.
Yeah. And also, to BJ's point, pay yourself. Like, find a niche budget for yourself. I am terrible at this because I have a day job. And I've slowly been paying myself, like, a salary of $200 a month.
It took me 4 years to recoup one of my adventures just because I was like, but I want this artist. We all do stuff that we shouldn't, especially if you have a day job. But it's very important that you pay yourself, because you might love something and it might be your passion project, but if all it's doing is draining your wallet, there will come a point where what you once loved is no longer something you enjoy. And so, start out as you mean to continue. If at all possible, pay yourself something.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right. Well, we're 20 minutes over, so all good. We started a little late as well, so this rounds it out.
We're very rambly, so, you know.
I know.
Good luck to everybody viewing this. There's a lot of hidden gems. You just have to, you know, mine it out and write it down, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess one last question we didn't really quite cover much is stretch goals. CNN's
The whole Kickstarter.
1877 talks asking about stretch goals. So yes, you think about your stretch goals before you launch your project. You should have them planned out at the number value before you launch. You usually don't have to show off all your stretch goals. It's better to like reveal them slowly. Like maybe you'll have your first one, or you'll have your like we funded, and then shade out everything else. And you'll have to have different assets for that.
I think it's important to have like, you know, 2 or 3, like 2 showing, because it gives you something to look forward to. If we fund, here's this other really cool goal. So one of the most important things about stretch goals is budgeting, just like everything else. How much is that stretch goal going to cost you versus how much is it actually going to make you? So there's a lot of things you can do with stretch goals, like add extra words. And like I think Craig was saying, even though that stuff is already there, you can make it a stretch goal. And I think going back to the point in the video where he was describing how he had a bigger project that he scaled down and put bites of it into stretch goals is the best way you can manage stretch goals. Because again, if your stretch goals are dice and a t-shirt and all this other stuff, it's very bad. It sounds cool and you think it's going to bring people in, but it's really just going to cost you money. It was
a popular thing years ago, and now everyone's burnt out because there were a bunch of projects that couldn't deliver because it costs a lot.
Yep, like, it's true. Plus, how many of those t-shirts do you really need hanging in your closet that you're never going to wear anyway?
Yeah. No,
my answer is apparently like 30, but you know.
Yeah, the lower your goal, the better usually. I mean, obviously you still want it to be reasonable, depending on the scale of your project. And then stretch goal things out, and then check your math, because your print to digital backer ratio, you build a spreadsheet, because your print, like you might have an estimate of, I'm going to get, 60% digital backers, 40%, 30% print backers, and then like a couple percent of like exclusive backers or exclusive item backers. But outside of that, like, what if your numbers are different? What if you now have to print more books than you expected? Or your shipping costs are going to be higher than you expected.
What if stuff gets lost and you just have to write it off? So you have to worry about loss prevention too, because every time you have a product, you're going to lose stuff. Now, you're not like in a store where people are stealing it, so it's not that level of LP, but you're going to have some. This book is damaged. I have to send out another one. Maybe if you're not insuring your packages, then if it shows up damaged, you have to replace it. And that's another thing. Do you want to insure your packages? Because if I ship a book and it arrives and it's, say like this book here, which is gorgeous. You would be so upset if that book arrived and the post office had thrown it all around and it was dinged up. I would be mad. I would be like, hey, this showed up. And yeah, exactly.
For me.
Open Legend actually had a huge story about this.
So
what happened, because I work with that warehouse, is they shipped the pallet to the post office. It was uninsured. The pallet got rammed by a forklift at the USPS and damaged a whole bunch of books. And because it was uninsured,
they won't do anything about it.
And there was a lot of issues in deciding what kind of packaging, what kind of shipping to do for Open Legend that's way separate from the printer and the warehouse.
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to say. I was actually the Kickstarter manager for that project. I was not. I was literally just marketing. I was not on creation. I was not on.
That's so funny because
I don't even really know him, but I did do the marketing for that.
Because I worked with the warehouse and we had a whole conversation about what happened, and that was fascinating in its own right, because it is a risk, to ship out.
It is a risk. Well, and if you think about it, so I have all of the D&D books and like the special editions and stuff. 3 of them I have returned. Well, 3 of them I have emailed WotC and been like, hey, this is damaged. You shipped it to me damaged. What do you want me to do? And they are wonderful. They've replaced every one of them and left me with the old ones. So I've like donated it to kids and stuff. Like I gave one away to a kid who wanted to get into D&D. But that's 3 books just in my house that they're out of for special editions. So insurance.
And as a creator, important. So insurance is one way to go about recouping some of that damage cost. But in addition, as a creator, like if a backer gets a damaged book, there's kind of like two ways to do it. They can ship it back to you. So now you have a damaged book that you can do something with, whether you want to sign it, you know, give it to a friend, auction it off
for a charity or thing.
I just send the backer, and I've done both actually. I've sent backers a new book and just said, hey, give it to a friend. You know,
a lot of times I just tell them to donate. I'll be like, can you send me a picture of the book? You send in a picture of the book. I can see it. It's damaged. Just donate it to the school or donate it to the library or children's charity.
And I've also had them ship back damaged books and refunded their shipping because for Embers, actually, I had a huge problem with the printing because they vacuum sealed it too quickly. They shrink wrapped it too quickly. And so when you're peeling off, it would peel off the leather cover. So I have about a 7% defect rate on those books that I need to do a bunch of returns about because that ended up happening. And so part of that comes to what is your relationship with your printer and do they guarantee product?
And you have to ask that in advance and make sure you have it in writing because seriously, a lot of them don't. And the post office is not going to do anything. Even if if the post office burns down and all your stuff is in it, you're still not going to get your money back unless you insured your packages. So it's, and so that's something you have to factor in. There's so many little things that you would never think of unless you were told to think of them. And I think insurance is probably one of the bigger ones. I hear about it being missed a lot of the time. And sometimes you just can't afford it. Or you don't want to pass it on to people. Every now and again, I'll see a Kickstarter that says, if you want to insure your package, pay this extra cost. Otherwise, we are not responsible for damaged goods, you know? So you have to really figure out how you're going to handle that because figuring it out after the fact is not pretty.
All right. Well, I think we're about up on time. I think my fiance is looking at me with evil eyes.
I really want more coffee.
Yeah, more coffee. I hear there are cinnamon buns downstairs. I can smell them. So I need to do an owlbear picture with cinnamon buns. But at the end of the day, you don't have to do it alone. Talk to your friends, get advice from people, hire a professional. Don't go into this blind with your own ideas. Yes,
nobody
go
works
into
well
it with
in a
your own
vacuum.
ideas, but
don't steal other people's.
Talk to people, collaborate, build, and improve, and you will and share early and share often. Update early, update often. Within
reason, please don't spam people every day for 30 days prior to your Kickstarter. We will hate it before it launches. 2 weeks at most.
Yeah. Be genuine.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Best
everyone.
of luck.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this panel. I'm Andreas Walters. I am president of Metal Weave Games and creator of the Baby Bestiaries, Hyperlight Drifter, Tabletop RPG, and other things. You can find me on Twitter at Andreas_MWG or on our website, metalweave.games. Our panelists, Craig, feel free. Who are you? How can they find you?
I'm Craig Campbell. I am at Nerdburger Craig on Twitter. The company website is nerdburgergames.com. On there right now, I know everybody's in Gen Con mode right now, but if you haven't gotten your fill of indie RPG playing, I'm doing a little online thing in a couple of weeks, August 14th through 16th. If you go to nerdburgergames.com, there's a page for it. There's a event program with 40 indie games, many of them being run by the designers of the games. So check that out. And there's a Discord in there too. You can come talk to all of us.
Perfect. And who are you, BJ? Where can people find you?
I'm actually pretty easy to find because I forget things. I'm ADD, so I made it easy to remember for myself, making it easy to remember for other people. You can find me on Facebook at BJ Hensley1. You can find me on Twitter at BJ Hensley2 or Instagram at BJ Hensley3.
Oh gosh, that's great. All right. Well,
of course, playgroundadventures.net and wolflair.com.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to stop this recording.